Hey, fellow traveler. Welcome to the Third Eye Awakening podcast, a show where we talk all about spiritual and psychic awakening, magic, the shift from 3D to 5D, star seeds, ascension, multiple timelines, multiple dimensions, the universe, the multiverse, the Akashic Records, all the good things. I am your host, Amy Belair, and I'm so glad to have you here with me today. Okay, let's do this. Hey, beautiful listeners. Welcome back for another episode of Third Eye Awakening. Today, I have Mitchell with me, and we are going to talk about avatar theory as well as fairly certain a bunch of other things. I'm very excited. So Mitchell self-describes as a guy who lives in North Carolina, a normal guy having an extraordinary experience of life. So welcome, Mitchell. Thank you so much for your time and being willing to have this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited about our conversation.
Me too. So will you tell us, me included, since this is our first conversation, a little bit more about yourself and how you came to be thinking about cool things like avatar theory and astral projection and sleep theory and multiplayer theory?
Well, for me, it's just been a journey. I'm like a sponge. I like to research history. I like to research spirituality, anything I can get my hands on. I've always been very, very curious and very, very much just like a sponge and questioning everything. I'm from North Carolina, lived here my whole life, and I'm actually a dog groomer. I have a really good connection with dogs. I've loved working with dogs my whole life, and it's been awesome just living life and just seeing what happens, what comes.
Yeah, and that's awesome. So do you feel like you were always like you say you're always sort of a questioner, but like even when you were a little kid, were you like dubious about things that people said and you wanted to like figure it out for yourself?
I would say yes, just because I was homeschooled by my mom. She raised us to be free thinkers and raised us to always ask why or always question and never just take things that people tell you at face value. So I guess she kind of instilled that in us at a very young age.
That is a beautiful thing, but I bet she didn't instill it. I bet she just fostered it. She didn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think all kids are born like that. I mean, that's why they ask why incessantly, right? Because they just want to know and they don't, I don't know. I remember being a little kid and definitely thinking I was smarter than most of the adults. I don't know that I was, but I
Yeah.
think I was like more of a free thinker at that time. So, okay. So this is so interesting. Your whole life you were kind of really open to these concepts and just like being free with your imagination and your ability to perceive things in the world.
I would say mostly, I had my kind of, I guess you'd say, awakening point was more so when I was about 30. I started really delving into more esoteric things, more along the lines of just really questioning why I thought what I thought and why I believed what I believed, and really like trying to find, is this really what's true? Is this really what I feel is my truth? And that led me down some amazing rabbit holes, and like I
Mhm.
said, I have my headphones in my ears at work. 8 hours I'm listening and learning and just compiling information almost nonstop.
And what are your favorite podcasts to listen to these days? You don't have to say mine. Don't worry. I'm not
Oh no,
fishing.
I do love yours. I do. I first heard you on Tinfoil Hat, and really just connected with what you said on it. It was like I was very, very impressed with your story and what you said. Also listen to Higher Side Chat and Crow 777, like the really deep stuff.
Yeah. The ones that really take you far down like some kind of rabbit hole of weirdness.
Yes, definitely.
Nice. Okay, so I really want to get into the avatar theory thing because I remember that's what when you reached out to me on Instagram, that was sort of the thing where you were like, I agree that we're all avatars too. And I was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, let's talk about it. So what's your perception of this whole environment we're in and this whole journey we're on?
Well, I know for me, I consider I want to use the concept like I'm not a big gamer, but I think the computers and gaming actually has a I'm really into movies too, so I'll be using movie references as well. Like the movie Avatar really spoke to me when I first saw it because it was a consciousness that took a body and was living that life through that body. And then that kind of makes sense for me because I think that our bodies, which I'll call our avatars, and then I think that we used to be part of a great consciousness, and you can call it God. I'm not a monotheistic; I'm polytheistic, so I believe in multiple gods. And I think that this great consciousness wanted to experience, and the only way to experience duality is to break yourself up into millions and billions of pieces and experience this life or a life, multiple lives, and compile that information back to yourself and then be able to experience all really. And so we are actually part of all that great consciousness, and we are on a journey back to the great consciousness. And we have a journey that we have to be on, that we're on currently. And it takes us multiple lives to maybe learn all the lessons we need to learn. But I think that journey for us is back to the great consciousness, and it's part of our soul journey in learning about this life.
Mm, yeah, I agree so much. And s- I had this really interesting experience in May of last year where I got, I don't know, it's like say it was a download, but now that I think about it, I think my consciousness just expanded enough to perceive the information that was always already available to me, but
Mhm.
of understanding. I can't say all of the dimensions because I don't know how many there are, but it was basically the 0 point field up to the 13th dimension of consciousness. And
Okay.
understanding the third dimension was like, oh, yeah, like it's exactly as you described. Like the second dimension of consciousness is polarity or like pairs, opposites. It's just that concept of something on a spectrum. And
Mhm.
then the third dimension is our our ability to experience that by having a choice in relationship to those, those 2 points at the opposite
Mhm.
ends of the spectrum. And that really we are all exactly that. We're all God that has fragmented itself into like infinite pieces, so that
Mhm.
it can experience itself. And it's almost like there have to be infinite pieces in order to truly buy into the illusion,
Yeah.
to forget that you're God so that you can have like real free will and make a choice,
Mhm.
you know, forgetting your
Yeah.
true nature.
I think that too, like when we originally created this realm for us to have this experience, to experience this duality, that the original humans we didn't have the same hangups we have now. We didn't have
Mm.
like we could do everything that I could talk to you without using technology.
Yes.
I
I
could,
agree.
yeah, I could. I think I would. You can travel anywhere and do anything and experience any point in time. I think we didn't have limits like we have right now. I think we basically use technology right now as a crutch to be able to do what we could have done back many eons ago. And I think actually we may have been tampered with. I think this kind of goes into the Anunnaki theory too. And then we had like you know how like you have a Vespa or a moped, and it has an inhibitor chip on it, so it can only go up to about 35 miles per hour.
Mm,
But once you take that inhibitor chip off, you can go as fast as you want. I think we have that in us. As we got tampered with, I think our abilities have been dampened.
yeah. I totally feel the same thing. Or like, I don't know, it just makes sense to me, especially as I am in contact with other people, but especially with babies. And you might find this with dogs. It's like we totally have the ability to communicate telepathically.
Mhm.
It's probably way, way weaker than it used to be, but
Yeah, absolutely.
that we still have the ability. It's just like everything funnels us away from that,
Mhm.
like, very early on. And I definitely believe that we have implants in us that, come through toxins in our environment, in our water, in our food, in our cosmetics, in our
Absolutely.
pharmaceuticals, things like that. And I feel like they're not, I don't know. And I just never can understand people who just think like, oh, it's just the way it is now. Cause like this is how society has evolved. It's just big industry. Like we just pollute too much. That's it. To me, it's so clearly an agenda our to
Mhm.
keep parts of us offline, and that even the use of technology, like, bless it, because now we can talk to each other, right? But at the same
Yeah,
time, it like you said, it's a crutch, so it makes us dependent on the technology rather than developing our own internal organic technology that allows us to connect and communicate without having to use an external device or tool or whatever.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And I think that we used to be so much more and be able to do so much more. And like I said, we just use technology now to fill in those gaps where we're lacking in ourselves. Like I can actually astral project, and I've been doing it like since I can remember. I've had very vivid dreams, and I've been able to actually travel to some of those higher realms. And actually, one day should have done it, but I went down to a lower realm, and it was the most frightening experience of my life.
Oh my god, tell me about it.
Well, it was like I think just one morning I was just like meditating. I was like kind of in a dream, halfway dream state. And I wanted to just like experience what the lower realm was like. And I kind of just felt myself slipping down, like on like a platform, but then sliding down. And it was black and very cold. And it was just like a feeling that you don't want to be there. But I was like, I'm gonna check this out. And then
You're like the character in the horror movie that everyone's like, "Don't do it, man. Like, don't
yeah,
go."
exactly. Well, and then like I felt something reach up and grab my leg, like a tentacle, and it began to pull me. And that's when it got really scary. And then I had to pull myself out.
And so you didn't even fully go in there, you just felt something reaching for you to pull you down in there, and you were
Yes.
like, "Mm-mm, I have free will. I'm not doing."
Yeah. It
Yeah.
was yeah, I just I didn't I don't think I was at a place where I should have been down there. So, I mean, I've had the protections that I need to have up in order to experience that.
Yeah. So, okay, so do you feel like that realm was like a lower astral realm? There, because I see a
Yeah.
difference between the astral layers versus the dimensions of consciousness. To me, the dimensions of consciousness are just the way that consciousness expresses and organizes itself at
Mhm.
different dimensions of, it's not even density, it's just like all the different ways it interlocks together.
Yes.
Whereas the astral layers to me feel like, when we talk about things like demons or lower astral entities, they don't necessarily feel like they live in the second dimension to me. They just feel like they live in
Mhm.
lower astral layers of lower vibration.
Yeah. I would agree with that, just because but then again, I've actually astral projected on this plane as well, and, like, I've gone all over the place to visit, like, people as they were like, my fiancée, when we were before we got married, I went to go she was in Africa at the time, and I went to go to see her, and I just to make sure everything was okay. So I used to be able to do that all the time. I could travel here and there on this plane if I wanted to, or I could go in different other types of planes, like, I went to a very, very high plane one time. It was one of the most amazing experiences I ever had. The sky was like a indigo color, and it was like a almost like a desert oasis type thing, and I heard voices speaking, but they spoke in the lightning, and it just ricochet across the sky. It was amazing. Like, I felt very, very at peace and just love and oneness in that place. It was polar opposite from the other room I was at.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. So, oh my goodness. so many things that I want to explore. Well, with the lower realm, did it feel to you like did the astral levels feel to you, or wherever you felt that you were, do they feel like a variation in vibrational rates, like a rate of frequency?
I would say yes, because well, the the lower realm felt like almost like an absolute nothing, but a full nothing. I don't know if that sounds like that sound makes sense at all. Like a low drum, like a low drum that's just sucking everything out of you.
Right. I think I understand what you mean. It kind of like what it's conjuring up for me is like the lowest note on a bass guitar, but it'll the vibration of it, like it's so low and so deep, but it also is has that energy of like that we associate with blackness of absorbing
Mhm.
all the light, like it's
Yeah.
pulling the light out of you.
Yeah, exactly. And the higher realm, it wasn't exactly like it was a high vibration, but it wasn't like a high note. It just felt like like a warmth and a peace.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was a very different in just the feel of the spaces there.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Like very, very, very great distance between the two.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so you said that you used to be able to do that all the time. Do you still do it?
Oh yeah, I still do it regularly. At certain points, I had more time and was able to, I guess, more develop like
Mhm.
where I wanted to go, going at will, that kind of thing. Now, mostly I don't travel on this plane that often. I try to go to like the higher planes or places where I can learn something. But yeah, I definitely still do. Maybe
That's
not as often as I used to, but I still do.
yeah, because life gets busy. Time is a big factor, eh? Like if
It is.
you don't have the time, it's I think a lot of people get frustrated with themselves around that about not feeling like they can't do, these things, but it really you have to have that feeling of like undisturbed space and time around yourself where you're not going
Mhm.
to get interrupted, where your body feels safe for
Yes.
your consciousness to leave or explore or whatever. It's kind of like I was thinking about it because I'm just wrapping up my program into the Akasha and thinking about people feeling discouraged like they can't do it easily, but they sometimes have like kids or busyness in the background. I'm like, it's kind of
Mhm.
like taking a poop. Like you don't want to poop if you feel like you're gonna have somebody knock on the door or barge in. Like
Yeah.
it's like you just need to know you're safe and that you're gonna have some personal space to
Mhm.
explore these things.
Yeah, I agree totally with that.
So did you just start spontaneously doing it?
I think I've always been able to do it. Like it's I've always been like I've always seen like shadow people. I've always seen dead people. I mean,
Yeah.
not so much like awake, but in my dreams.
Mm-hmm.
When my grandmother died, like I saw her go to the ancestors. My great uncle actually came to get her, but I didn't know it was my great uncle until I described my dream. I say dream in quotes because I'm these are not really dreams.
Yeah,
I described who I saw to my mother, and she said, "That's your great uncle," and I never met him.
that's amazing.
So yeah, I've always had very vivid dreams and very uh, interesting times when I was sleeping or almost sleep.
Does your brother have those experiences too?
He does, I believe. Several of us, like in my family, inherited it from my grandmother, I believe, and my mother is kind of the same way as well.
Yeah, that's really, really, really cool. I know exactly what you mean when you say like you use the term dream, but what you really mean is that your body is asleep
Yeah,
and you're having an experience while your body is asleep. Yeah,
yeah, yes, I have I have a lot of those quote unquote dreams.
yeah. That's so, so
Get
cool.
deja vu a lot.
Tell me more about what you think is going on here. Like I'm interested in hearing about the sleep theory and the multiplayer theory and like just sort of how you perceive this whole environment? Like, do you feel like it's a realm or a simulation? I feel like all those words just miss the mark anyway. Like, we're doing our
Mhm,
best to articulate in words, in imperfect
mhm.
happy words, something that's so much bigger than.
I agree totally. I think that we have, like, little glimpses, like movies like The Matrix that, and, like, Ready Player One and Gamer that kinda, like, give us, like, little glimpses into, like, what it might be like. 'Cause I even thought myself once, if I was a character in Minecraft, would I wouldn't even know that I was blocky, or I wouldn't know that I wasn't in Call of Duty because my perception is my reality.
Yes, totally.
So, what I come as far as, like, I think multiplayer is because I was toying around with the idea of maybe if you can have an avatar, I wonder if you could have more than one consciousness in an avatar at the same time. Like, what if you have a consciousness that wanted to experience this life, but didn't really want to do a whole lot, kind of a lazy consciousness, just along for the ride?
Uh-huh.
And then what if, like, you had a consciousness that actually wanted to hijack your avatar, like hack your avatar and take over? Wouldn't that be kind of like possession or someone like having schizophrenia?
Mhm.
And because I know, like, there's been times like you've heard stories, and someone just said, like, someone just came over me and I had no idea what I was doing. Well, that could be your another consciousness take over. Just like little things like that that I thought could be interesting. And then this whole realm could be in a multiplayer mode. Like it could be other greater consciousness interacting with our realm and interacting with us in our avatars. These could be your aliens, or these could actually just be other consciousnesses, not the consciousness that we are, just playing with our avatars.
Yeah, that's
Does
really
that make sense?
no, it does make sense. And so interestingly, I've seen like both of those examples you gave of somebody having a lazy sort of like tag along
Yeah.
consciousness. I've seen that in the Akashic records. It seems to feel when I've seen it, like it's related to somebody that I would call a star seed who maybe hasn't like they haven't lived a bunch of full earth lives, but they more
Mhm.
like tagged along with somebody else's avatar for part of the ride,
Mhm.
get some experience to sort of like, acclimatize, but they were like, I don't want a whole fucking life.
Right, yeah.
A lot of work. I just want to come to the great awakening part.
Yeah.
And then also, but I think that's exactly what happens in cases of possession, that they are other, or possession air quotes, but like really truly it feels like sometimes somebody is trying to take over the wheel of
Mhm.
another person's vehicle, so to speak, of their
Yeah.
and they they often do so by invoking that person's own dark passenger, their own like,
Mhm.
our own shadow side, and really strumming all those pain points for a long
Yes.
time and dragging them down into low vibe places and then being like,
Mhm.
move over, I'm driving now. and
Yeah.
and I've met people too who have mental illness and who feel like when they go into an extreme, like I have a friend who has bipolar, and she would say when she went into mania, she would be like, I guess when she came out, she would feel like she wasn't fully responsible for what she did. Because
Right.
she felt like it really was not her, as she knows herself, who was making those choices. And
Mhm.
I would that always stuck with me because I mean, from my end, I was like, well, they still happened to me. you know, I had this thing taken from me or that thing done. But on the other hand, I could see the difference in her character whenever she would have those swings. And I would think, man, that fucking sucks to have your own brain chemistry betray you and totally morph you into a different person with different priorities. And but that's interesting now to kind of think like, oh, maybe that is just like ripe for a multiplayer, you know,
Yeah.
activated realm where somebody gets to be like, oh, this is a great entry point to take somebody else's car for a joyride.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And I think it may happen a little bit more often than we think it happens. Because I've heard someone even go into like NPCs, like non-player characters, and but I'm not really into to that because I think that would just make yourself too much of a player. Does that make sense as well?
Elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, I think that would like go along with you. It's not all about us, and but I think there might be just players that are just moving throughout the realm and moving out to reality and maybe not really doing kind of going through the motions of life.
Definitely.
But I think they still have a consciousness. I'm just not sure if they're fully like maybe they're on autopilot in
Yeah.
their lives in general.
Yeah. I recently had a conversation. One of the guests I had on my podcast, Ketsuban, he had me on his show and we were talking about NPCs. And I was like, I think I was like maybe taking the analogy too literally because I was like, I've never met anybody that doesn't seem to like be occupied by a soul. I've
Hmm.
never met an empty body.
Yeah.
But I've met a lot of people who are very heavily brainwashed and hypnotized
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
like are having incredibly profound trauma responses where
Yeah.
they then like they go through the motions like you said, like they're kind of disassociated the way that
Yeah.
one is when they're sort of dealing with trauma and triggers. They just disassociate and they're like, I'm kind of like 5% here.
Yeah. I think that might be. I think in that case you probably do have like because I think we have like I think some people are energy vampires as well, and they do feed off other people's energy, and they do will take that energy from you as long as you allow them to, even if sometimes you don't. And sometimes I don't think we've always have been taught how to recharge our own energy levels. So if someone's just constantly sucking the energy off of us and we don't know how to get our energy level back up, then we could be running on low battery all the time.
Oh, definitely, definitely, definitely. And like, not only are we not, because I agree with you 100%, I feel like we barely know how to like how to use our own avatar.
Mhm.
Like we barely remember what it's capable of anymore. And we're just
Yeah.
like, so most of us are so distracted by adulting. Like yesterday, I spent all day. Oh my gosh, like I was filing my taxes, which are late and like really late, whole year late. And oh, dealing with an insurance thing and just like doing adult stuff. But I was like, God, this takes up a lot of time and energy. Like there's a reason
Mhm.
I end up being late on it because I want to do other things with myself. But a lot of people like we're really caught up in those administrative bullshit things that have been created in the systems that we exist in.
Mhm.
And we're working jobs because we need to pay the bill. And like it's all these systems.
Mhm.
And then so we find escapes in entertainment, but it's all a distraction that keeps us like distracted from the actual magnificent organic. I call us organic technology because to me, like we're capable of so much,
Mhm.
but I don't feel like we are like I don't like just saying technology because I don't think we're comparable to AI. Like I feel like the difference is the presence of that like that spark, that God consciousness spark,
Mhm.
and that ability to attune to the divine love that you were talking
Mhm.
about in that higher realm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just feel like you're totally right. We don't know how to manage our energy, but also we have all these like screwed up wounds. And like, so you might have like a weird relationship. Somebody might have a weird relationship with one of their parents, for example, and their parent is really dysfunctional and has
Mhm.
addictions and is like really been a source of a lot of trauma for them, but they feel this weird loyalty and like
Mhm.
allowed to create boundaries and like yeah, it just sucks our energy dry. And so we're also functioning on like low power mode all the time.
Yeah, and I think if you actually think about, like, what a human is, and we are actually a pretty perfect being, because our spirits, our consciousness can move freely, very fluent in us. We can project ourselves. We can, I think, like we said at one time, we could use telepathy. We could do a lot of things that we can't do or haven't exercised, and we just don't know our full potential, and we don't know truly what we're capable of. And I think we've also been given like a lot of busy work, a lot of adulting to do, just to fuck with our shit and make us just like crazy and put so much like on our plates to where we're just exhausted all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And we just want to check out and we just want to watch something on Netflix or Crave or YouTube or whatever
Hmm.
because we're just tired. So we want to passively consume something that like distracts us.
Hmm.
But then it leaves us with nothing left over to cultivate our true potential.
Exactly.
So do you think that we are headed in the direction of reconnecting with our true potential, or do you think it's still kind of like hanging in the balance?
Well, with this, I've actually kind of gone back and forth because to me, well, on one side, I would say, well, I have two thoughts about that. First one, to me, it seems like as a civilization as a whole, like humans have, our civilization looks like it has been reset. This whole realm has been reset a couple times. You can see with the Egyptians, even like the biblical stories, you can see with the Great Flood, like the whole world has been reset a couple times. And I think we are like the last iteration of that reset. And it could be that once too many players realize they're playing a game, just like if you're playing Call of Duty and your character realizes that it's a character in the game, it's not going to really listen to you. You can just kind of mess with the game and just fuck with the shit all the time because it's just a game to him then. So we could be on the verge of a soft reset, or we could be on the verge or have already, because I don't think, well, I guess I can equate it to this. Like, you know how like you talk to some people and we call them not awake. And no matter what you say to them, no matter how many conversations you have with them, and just like about spirituality, about the deeper things, they don't understand where you're coming from, what you're talking about. They just want to go back and watch CNN, Fox News, and just like veg out. And I think that is, or could be, deep one of the parts of the Great Awakening, that those who are awake, and those who are not awake maybe not wake up. And it sucks because those of us who are awake have to pretend like we're not awake a lot of times just to function in reality. And I sometimes don't see a mass awakening for the globe. I think those who are awake are awake. And it sucks because we wanted to bring everybody along with us, but I don't think everybody can come.
Yeah. Have seen something fairly similar where it feels like more people want to come than we. It depends on where you consume your information from, right? Like some of it
Mhm.
looks really pessimistic and other sources look really optimistic. So it depends on the angle you're viewing it at, but I feel like ultimately there are a lot of souls that really do want to go to that next level of our capability,
Mhm.
but that not all souls want to, and that
Right.
they and that it can feel like it's a bad thing because unfortunately the shitty thing is that sometimes it's people we know and
Mhm.
love, and we just want to be like, yeah, like come like,
Exactly.
but they have experience they desire to gain as the higher consciousness of themselves, the soul version of themselves has experience they want to gain through the choose your own adventure realm of like the 3D
Mhm.
and the lower 3D, and it can be hard to let it be that way, but that's that's the whole thing of respecting free will. And it kind of reminds me of like, I mean, there were points in my life where it's all relative, but from the outside perspective of certain members of my family and my friend groups, I probably looked like a hot mess making terrible decisions. But they were just like, why, Amy? Uh, but they could not override my soul's need to evolve through those experiences.
Mhm.
And I had the full right to go through that mess and learn how to, live out the consequences of it.
Mhm.
Um, and I think about my mom, who would have like done almost anything to save me from a whole bunch of the different pain painful things that I have experienced. But I feel like, yeah, but that was my pain, I get to have it, I
Mhm.
go through it so much. And I think
Yeah.
that about the people who we see as unawake, who aren't prepared to awaken, that they still have there's still something here for them, and we can't
Mhm.
take that away because the rest of us are ready. Like, we're like, no, no, we got what we need, we're ready to move.
Yeah. Well, I have a question for you, because I know, like, in the Akashic Records, okay, so I know, like, the ancient Egyptians, they believed that you didn't reincarnate until your body decomposed. So they had elaborate things to allow their bodies to still be around today. And in some other cultures, like, they burn the body as soon as you die. Other cultures, they bury the body naturally. And I think that a lot of the quote unquote elite are trying to move us toward like a technocracy,
Mhm,
to where we merge with AI and our consciousness stays, I would say, trapped within an AI, so they don't have to reincarnate and lose their memory. I think all that's about losing memory. They want to continue their consciousness without losing their memory, so they
mhm.
can maintain the power they had. But how do you think that affects the Akashic record, or if you think it does at all, or how it affects us on a reincarnation level? Like, do we like if our bodies don't decompose? Is that just something they believed, or if our consciousness does get downloaded into like AI, does that affect our soul journey? Does our soul end up actually being trapped? Our consciousness.
That is a fascinating question, and I will I haven't thought that deeply on it from that angle yet, so I'm going to sort of stumble through this. But so I think that's exactly the agenda, is to, number one, avoid death, in the sense of, like, on the part of the elites. I don't think they care if we die.
No, no.
But on their part, as to avoid death and avoid paying their tab, and but also to exactly keep their memory, keep their consciousness. So I have this suspicion, I don't know if my podcast is going to get pulled for saying this, but have you ever seen the movie The Skeleton Key?
I have. Good movie.
Yes, it was a good movie. I totally think that Queen Elizabeth is going to skeleton key, like, she's going to do that whole like thing.
Oh, where they get to come back as they just transfer consciousness into a new body every time.
It's a Kate.
But but keep their consciousness, but just transfer into a younger body.
I think that's what she's up to. I personally
Yeah.
think that, yeah. I think, and she's been waiting for the right one, and Diana wasn't the right one.
Mm.
So she was waiting, and that's why she just like refuses to die and refuses to like, give anybody else any power. She's just going to be of her particular little hive. But anyway, I think, yes, that's exactly it. They want to maintain continuity of their consciousness and their memories, and
Mhm.
therefore like their dominion as they see it. For the rest of us, that's a really interesting question in terms of the Akashic Records. Well, I got this interesting, I don't know, I can't fully call it a download, but I was just stretching like a month ago, just stretching just before bed, not even doing yoga. I was being very lazy. And all of a sudden, I just got this insight that, like, oh, the grays are those of us that the grays are us. The grays are the ones who went along that path, that bifurcation of uploading into the tech mind,
Mhm.
and all of the other interdimensional beings that, like we call Pleiadians or Arcturians or Syrians or what have you,
Mhm.
are the us that didn't, that went on to prioritize our organic selves and
Mhm.
our right to die and reincarnate and all that stuff. And I kind of have been sitting on that for a while, and only just recently have been feeling willing to talk about it with anyone because it just took me by surprise to get it. But I'm not sure if it's symbolic or if it's literal. I haven't really puzzled that out yet. But I do feel like there is a pretty big diversion for the souls. It's almost like a piece of their consciousness. So the souls that do go along with the transhumanist pathway,
Mhm.
there is a piece of their consciousness that is no longer, or not, I don't know, I don't think it's forever, like for all eternity ever, but for a long time will not be accessible to them. And
Mhm.
so it's a little bit like they're not,
Kinda like a splinter of their soul.
yeah, kind of like they're not, you know, that's a really good question because I feel like what I've seen in the Akashic records is that truly love trumps everything, and this is all one consciousness anyways.
Mhm.
All one consciousness, and it's playing out a scenario that we can't fully understand.
Mhm.
And that it's all, the whole thing is a return to that consciousness ultimately.
Mhm.
But there's a big detour for those who choose to continue moving away from it. And
Mhm.
that the merger with technology moves us away from it. And so it feels like I'm gonna like actually ask the Akashic records that. So later I'm gonna be like, whoa. But I feel like it probably impedes the ability to incarnate. But we're already experiencing that anyway, because I also have seen that there's a lot of people who that we would call NPCs, or
Mhm.
one would potentially call an NPC, who are not fully getting that lucid free will decision to reincarnate the same way that others of us who are awakened are. And
Mhm.
I don't mean that in any hierarchical way. I mean that we're heavily manipulated. So when
Mhm.
people die
Yes.
and they don't, and when people die and they've spent a whole lifetime completely forgetting who they are and being very stuck in the same patterns and the same perspective, and they've generated a lot of emotional baggage around their experiences, they
Mhm.
don't, what happens is they get magnetically pulled into another incarnation opportunity that matches that same. And that's kind of what we consider.
Kinda like stuck in a loop.
Yeah, and it's like that's partly what we consider the karmic wheel.
Mhm.
It's not that we have to come back and like work through it and we're mandated by some higher being. It's like the emotions create a magnetic charge, and they sort
Mhm.
of it's, like when somebody dies and we see them as a ghost because there's a piece of them that didn't get resolution.
Mhm. Yes.
It's like that, like there's some story that's keeping itself alive, and it harnesses part of their consciousness and just like pulls them into a similar avatar scenario with a similar
Mhm.
emotional frequency. And so they keep sort of being stuck, and they don't get the same like full rise and expansion back to their consciousness, their full consciousness, that others do. And I had taken that for granted for a long time until like somewhere in the last few months when I started to get more information about like, oh no, it's just that all the people that come see you for Akashic readings are really awake. There's all these other people that aren't in the same boat necessarily. I don't know if that's
Mhm.
making sense.
It does. It's different with it, and I've always looked at it. I've always thought we're more like energy beings, and if because usually when you see a ghost, or I wouldn't even call them ghosts, I would call them more like, you know how like when you put your hand on a piece of glass and you take your hand off, it's always there's a print there.
Yeah.
I would consider it more like an energy print.
Yeah.
Like you spent so much energy in that action, that motion, that area to where you leave a imprint on it. That's the reason why ghosts are usually doing those apparitions are usually doing one action, they're walking back and forth.
Yes.
They don't really interact with anybody. They just kind of walk here, walk there, and because I think it's like a energy print. Something happened so
Hmm.
much in that one spot that you left an energy print there, and it's still there.
Totally. I totally think that. I think they're slightly different things. Like, so there's some ghosts that are energy imprints, and some of them that are a little bit more interactive, but
Mhm.
it's similar. It's not their whole soul. Like when I
Right.
connect with them, it's not their whole soul. It's a piece of a fragment of their consciousness that got stuck in the story
Yeah.
of whatever perception they had that generated a lot of emotion, and the emotion seems to be the magnetic part that keeps them stuck.
Mhm.
Yeah, anyway, it's so interesting. So I guess to bring it back to the agenda, the transhumanist agenda, what it feels like to me is, if if souls choose that path, they're going to be on that path for a long time, and that it will resolve itself, but got they're taking themselves out of the natural cycle. So
Mhm.
it's almost the way that, like, it takes plastic an eternity to decompose,
Right.
because it's not in its organic form. It is created from organic compounds, but it's
Mhm.
been altered. It feels like that, like they'll be there for a long time before
Mhm.
they can break it down enough to fully release. But I don't know that it's like a full soul trapping. It's just a partial
Mhm.
soul trapping. But man, that's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much still along the same line. I don't think I think, like you said, it'd be more like a fracture in
Yeah,
your soul, and that would impede the continuation of your soul journey. But I think, like you said, that one part of your consciousness would, I guess, just have to be released or to to rejoin before it can your soul journey can be completed. I think it would definitely impede your journey.
yeah, yeah. Like keep you in a some kind of like holding pattern, or like you can't. I don't know. I even take issue with some of the words like ascend and evolve, because it sounds so hierarchical. Like that's what our human minds make of it, but
Hmm.
you can't reach the next level of closeness or return to the source love consciousness that you are, until
Right.
that piece gets to return to you, but it's kind of engaged in a weird construct that is challenging to liberate it from, like, be liberated from, or something like that, because it's inorganic.
Yeah, and I think it would even, because I think actually sleep is a chance for our consciousness to do a download itself. That's why you can only go for so long without sleep, because you have to download the information that you have from the day, the life, and then because if you're trapped in that one element, that AI, you would be able to do your own downloads.
That's right.
So,
Yes, yes, totally, totally. Like, yeah, like, so are you meaning that when we go to sleep, we can, first of all, filter the information that we've received, because we've received so much more during a daytime than, or like a span of awakeness,
mhm,
than we can consciously account for.
right,
We're assimilating it, figuring out where to fit it, but also like
sending it back to source.
sending it back and receiving
Mhm.
intel kind of in exchange, or insights, like it's
Yeah.
understanding. Yes, and that Totally. That would be the part that would be disconnected, is like you can't, you are
You just become overloaded.
and you also, but your consciousness is being hijacked. So all the intel that you have that you would send back to source is
Hmm.
being redirected to this like Borg mind kind of
Yeah.
thing. And but you're not getting any upgrades yourself
Hmm.
ever.
Exactly.
And but it feels to me like it's got to break down at some point. Like it can't,
Hmm.
because it's all one. I don't know. To me, it feels like all one being. Like on an episode of Tinfoil Hat not long ago, the guest said that God and Satan are the same being, and I was like, yeah, it is. It's the same. Like
Hmm.
it ultimately, there's all just one, and we are all
Yeah.
one, and we're going through these dramas, and it's hard to understand from a human perspective. But
Hmm.
I don't feel like I feel like one always has to return to one
Right.
at some point.
Yeah. I mean, I think that ability to return and do those downloads are what make us real refreshed in the morning. And I think during that time when we're doing our downloads, we can also do a little fun stuff as far as astral travel and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think those downloads are essential, because otherwise, I mean, you can understand like how fatigued you get if you don't sleep for a certain amount of like for a day or two. Like your mind just starts to literally break down.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Oh, that's so fascinating. That's so fascinating to think like, yes, we're sending intel back and we're receiving intel in exchange, like in
Hmm.
that, beautiful cyclical way that all of creation works together.
Yes.
And that how much of a nightmare it would be to actually be cut off from that. It would
Yeah.
be
It's
forever.
yeah. It's a lot to think about. I mean, I just like it's fascinating, like just how this realm just works and how we fit inside it.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's a responsive environment and that we
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, I think because I feel like the Earth. Well, whether you feel like it's flat or round, I think it's interactive. I believe it's alive, and it gives us energy, and it balances out the energy. We disrupt its energy, and it has to like cleanse its energy from us from time to time. But absolutely, I think this environment definitely is interactive with us, and we can have an influence on it. I think it has to be more like broad strokes, not like I want $10,000, I want $2,000, and oh, I've got $10,000 now. I think it's more like you can put intention out there, but it can't be like targeted. It
yeah,
has to be more like I want to be like financially secure. I want like how to say it's more interactive with us, but we can't be so specific in what we're wanting. We have to be more, because we can't. It's easier for us to focus on. Mm, I guess it would be more like break it down to its most basic part, and then you can focus on that basic thing and focus energy on that, as opposed to focusing your energy on like a concept.
yes, I agree completely that like we can be specific if it's the most basic part, and then
Hmm.
otherwise let it take whatever form it's going to take.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, saying, I want $10,000, it's like, maybe you have a big credit card bill that you want to pay off because it's stressing you out. And what you really want is for that stress to be gone. What you really
Hmm.
want is to feel unburdened and free and like at ease in yourself and your nervous system. So, if you focus on that feeling, you could get really specific about that feeling in particular
Hmm.
and then not get fixated on the way that your brain thinks it needs to resolve itself.
Yeah.
It leaves all this room for this beautiful, interactive, responsive environment to take care of it for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I believe this realm is totally interactive. Like we can have intention. We can change things in it, and things can have like an effect on us as well. Yeah, I think this is definitely a very special place and definitely a very special realm.
Mm. Do you have any past life memories of your own?
I've had 2. One that, is more I can really remember it a lot better. I guess just because I think it's just because the emotion of that moment was so high for me. Well, one past life I do remember. I was Native American, and I can remember my face paint like totally. It's like the forehead part is black, the eyes no, the forehead part was red, eyes were black, and the lower mouth part was white. And there's two lines on the cheek of white. And we were dancing on the fire. So that's one that I remember very, very vividly. There's another one I remembered at one point, but I'm drawing a blank on it right now.
Mm. That's all right. That's really cool that you have a couple memories. And do you feel like do you feel like you're from here mostly, or do you feel like your soul has experience elsewhere in a different game?
You mean more like as far as being on a different world, or it's possible? Yeah, it's possible. I believe. I don't know that I have. I think most of my memories have well that I can remember are of here. Then again, I haven't done a whole lot of past life or, like, really delving into it that much, but yeah, I do feel like most of my existences have been here.
Mhm. But
Again, I could be wrong, though.
it's true, like you said too, though, that like if you're, a dude in Minecraft, you're not gonna like perceive yourself as blocky and your
Yes.
environment as blocky. You're not gonna be like, oh, I'm not in what's the other one that I'm thinking of that I'm the World of Warcraft. I'm not in World of Warcraft. You wouldn't
Mhm,
necessarily be thinking that because your experience is your perception, and
mhm.
therefore that's what you know. So
Yeah. So, yeah, I can't I mean, I honestly don't know. I may have been in a different world before, I just don't know.
yeah. Cool.
I'd like to, like, explore that a little bit more, but yeah, I don't know.
I had one crazy past life memory where I was this like it's so hard to even describe. It was like a being, it was like an undulating, almost like the shape of an eel, but it was not physical, but it was rippling colors, and it was like iridescent white that, as the light caught it, because I didn't see any source of light, would
Mhm,
sort of flash like a pastel, like pinkish or purplish or greenish. Like it had that iridescent quality to it. But it felt like I was in no time and no space and no, I don't know how I could see myself because there was no light source that I was aware of. And I
mhm.
existed there. It was the craziest thing ever. It's so hard
Wow.
to put it into words. I still have no idea. I'm like, is is that another world? Is that like the spirit
To me, that sounds like spirit to me.
idea? No idea.
So, do you think we can actually move to animals? Like, if like a person can come back as like a dog or a cat, or
I do see that sometimes, but I don't think that's normally how it goes.
I don't think so either.
Sometimes I would be curious to hear your take because you work as a dog groomer, but there are
Mhm,
occasionally some pets and I seem to see them more in dogs than cats, but sometimes in cats too, where it's like it's not a normal dog consciousness in there. It's more
mhm,
on par with a human consciousness. And it's not just that they're really smart or that they are, like overly humaned by their owners. It's like they have so much added sass and they're just
mhm,
kind of like, it feels like they're really bonded with their owner usually too. Like there's some kind of karmic, or I don't know if karmic is the right word, but like some reason, like soulmate-ish kind of reason that they're together.
mhm.
I'm thinking of my one friend who has this dog, and she asked me to tune into her, and I was just laughing because the dog was, I don't know that she was ever human, but she was a higher consciousness than normally, you know,
Mhm.
than a dog. And she was just like, would get really impatient and she's very particular, this dog, about like has her specific blanket. She wants to be tucked in just so, like she has, it's really funny. And so I tuned into her and I got this like, I am being a dog for you. So sometimes it happens, but it's not normally how it goes.
Yeah,
What
I've definitely known some dogs like that. They're just like, "You annoy me, just I'm putting up with you because I love you so much."
yes, I love you and I'm here being a dog for you. So
Yeah. I mean, I think I think dogs do come back. I do believe dogs have souls as well. I think they do come back as other dogs. I definitely believe that. Cats as well. I think sometimes we get to some of the lesser animals, like I don't know. I would even call them lesser animals. I think insects are different, but I don't think that they're all that different.
yeah.
And even like plants and trees, they're alive too, and they give energy and they receive energy back. I think we live in a very interesting place.
Yeah, we do. And we've really been through all the distractions we talked about, and then all the kind of programming to be distracted and to feel separate, right? We've
Hmm.
gotten very, very hyper focused into our perception, that the one that lives not in our third eye, but like in our frontal lobe, right behind
Hmm.
our visual.
Yes.
And we have forgotten how connected everything is, how alive everything is. I even feel that,
Hmm.
like, I'm a big crystal person, but even long before I was ever a crystal person, I always loved rocks. Like, I would love
Hmm.
going to places with big rocks and just lying on the rock and being like,
Yeah.
"You've seen so much, like, tell me what." And I feel like even though they don't have a nervous system, or plants don't have a nervous system that resemble ours,
Hmm.
they are super highly conscious beings, and they definitely communicate, like you said, like there's
Hmm.
so much awareness and consciousness in all of the creation on earth. It We just have forgotten.
I was watching something the other day. Even trees in the forest, they communicate with each other. Like it's quite amazing. So I
Yeah,
mean, it's there's definitely more to more to this life than even we are led to believe. Because I think actually a lot of things have been put in our way to cut us off from nature when nature is what it's all about.
it
Like
is what
being
it's all about.
yeah, being that one, having that oneness with everything around you. Because if you weren't busy with all this other busy stuff, you'd have time to just be a part of it.
Yeah, and there's a reason that like so many people are drawn back to nature, and not just
Mhm.
like it's very amplified this past year, but even before that there were like people feeling like they wanted to leave like the hustle and grind of city life
Mhm.
to get closer to nature. But also, like, kids love being out there. There's so much scope for the imagination in nature. It is what we are, like, it's what we're supposed to be playing in and exploring.
Yeah.
The avatar, like, it contains everything that we need. And I believe that scarcity is a lie, personally, and
Mhm.
manipulation.
Absolutely.
Although I completely recognize that people live experiences of terrible scarcity, but I don't
Mhm.
believe it's because there's actual scarcity on earth, like as Gaia, or the planet and all of
Mhm.
the abundant resources here. I believe it's like a manipulation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of this
I think there's more than enough resources for everybody and more than enough land, and they make us think it's overpopulated where it's actually really not. Like I heard that you can fit everybody the entire world in like Texas and give them an acre of land too, something like that.
Yeah, but also like apparently the continent of Africa is so huge that it's not represented
Yes.
scale on globes or maps. It's so huge. It's bigger than I think like almost every other continent except for I think it was Antarctica and Australia can fit into the continent of,
Yeah.
but that's not how it's depicted on the maps.
Mhm.
Like so
And Greenland's actually really small.
it's crazy. And so it's like our whole perception is being so screwed with basically. And I feel the same way. Like, first of all, how can anybody even verify that there are like, I don't know how many billions of people there supposedly are right now, but
Mhm.
who I'm not counting them. Like I haven't done so I'm taking somebody else's word for it basically.
Mhm.
Their word is that there's too many of us and we use too many resources. But as I see it, human beings are actually perfectly designed to be integrated with our natural environment. And it's
Mhm.
the systems that have been created through various stages of, like the Industrial Revolution, things like that.
Right.
A bunch of artificial systems that have those aren't sustainable. Those
Mhm.
aren't what aren't sustainable, and the amount of pollution those produce aren't sustainable. But that's a whole separate thing from saying that humans are overpopulated
Mhm.
and we're destroying our planet. No, no, no. It's the systems we're forced to exist in. I don't
Yes.
I always say, like, I don't wanna buy my daughter cookies and have every individual cookie wrapped in plastic. I don't wanna do that. It's really hard, like, it's very hard to live a waste-free life, or, like, she loves berries, loves them. She made me eat them every morning when I was pregnant, no joke, and she still wants them every morning now. She wants blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, and sometimes strawberries, and they come in those stupid little plastic things, and unless it's peak season here,
Mhm.
I can't get them otherwise because they're imported from somewhere else, right? There's better ways we could do this. There's better ways we could be doing this. It's not that humans are assholes. It's that we live in a terribly inefficient system and we're being gaslighted into believing that we're the problem. But
Yeah. I think it's all manipulation. Like,
yeah.
there a lot of things that are happening are just ways that we're being manipulated, and we're told that we're not doing this, we need to do this, and it's all part of an agenda to keep us under control, to keep us in fear, keep us in a fear state, because something is feeding off that fear, and something wants us to be, like, divided and confused,
Yeah.
and it's just, part of the trap of the trapping of life.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's something well, it was like a frequency match to that tentacle that you felt that was trying to pull you down into the dark
I
place?
think that was much worse, but I think what is feeding off our fear is something more along the lines of like a kind of like an energy vampire.
Mm.
As we are in a chaotic state, it's getting fed on that. As we are in like a fear state or a panic state, because we're all worried about if we're going to catch this or get that, and we're all in a fear state. I think these entities like us in that state because they can feed off our loose, our energy that
Mhm.
we give off, and it's all part of the plan, just to keep us running around like chickens with our heads cut off as it just feeds itself.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's hard sometimes. Like just yesterday, I learned about, I don't know if you've ever heard of these, but Morgellons fibers. They're in the virus swabs that
Hmm.
everybody's getting. And they're these weird, I don't know, they behave like parasites. I saw one person's video suggesting that they're actually like nanotech that is it has a magnetic and that's why it's responding. But anyway, they aren't inert cotton fibers. They move
Hmm.
and they cause a disease that of like eruptions on the skin and anyway,
Oh.
it's really crazy. And I was learning about that and for a minute I started to get sucked into the fear again and then I remembered like That's the whole game plan. Like,
Mhm.
there's never been a point when we are alive that we are not physically vulnerable to things on earth,
Mhm.
and that's what's being played upon. So even when we find out information that feels really scary, it's remembering like, oh no, but I'm infinitely stronger than all these implants, all these things. When I connect with
Mhm.
my soul consciousness and my power as a being that whose consciousness extends through multiple dimensions. And
Mhm.
when I remember myself as that, then I don't have to play into that like loose feeding fear trap,
Yes.
because that's ultimately what they feed on. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of it is like you have to give it permission by buying into it with your fear for it to
Yes.
affect you.
Yeah, I agree. Because I know that if you don't give it your energy, then it has to find it somewhere else, and it doesn't. You don't have to have that heaviness, that weight on you because you're not in that fear state. I think it's all about like the state of mind that you're in. Like if you're not worried about it, then it's actually not. I mean, not saying that you just go around not worrying about anything, because there are some things that you should worry about, but not being in a constant fear state.
Yes, exactly. It's sort of just remembering it's not saying like, oh, if you're not afraid of things, then you're never going to die, because that's not true.
Mhm.
We're mortal. Our avatars are mortal. That's
Mhm.
part of the design. But
Yeah.
not feeding it our excessive life force and our attention,
Mhm.
and just remembering that we are always mortal, no matter what threat is being played up and fanned up, that really
Mhm.
what they want. It's nothing new. It's nothing new to be mortal and to be physically vulnerable. They just want us to engage in the fear
Mhm.
aspect of it.
Because if you think about like our energy is something that must be something amazing, because we can shape our world with our energy. We people want our energy from us. There are beings that want to siphon our energy off of us. So our energy must be something pretty amazing.
I think humans are pretty special.
Yeah.
We do. Yeah, and that we live in a special realm. Mitchell, I feel like I've kept you for so long because I could talk to you for hours.
I've enjoyed talking to you a lot.
Yeah, it's been a huge joy. I feel like this is going to be an episode that will give a lot of people like, oh. Anyway, thank you so much for your time and sharing your perspective with us.
Thank you.
And thank you, beautiful listeners. You know I love you and I value your attention so very much. I always want to serenade you with the love song every time that I every time I wrap up a show, but you just mean a lot to me, because otherwise I would be still having these conversations with myself by my lonesome. So I love you for listening in on this podcast, and I hope you have a beautiful day or night wherever you are, and I'll catch you on the next episode, guys. Hello, beautiful being of shadow and light. If you loved this episode and you want more, you can join my new membership, Light Codes. This membership is the place where you will receive all the light codes that I am channeling on how to navigate the intensifying energies of this next phase of the rapid awakening and ascension of the human collective consciousness on Earth, but also all the light codes on how to step into our highest selves, to activate our soul mission, to harness our magic and power as creators, and to manifest the highest timelines for ourselves and for the collective. To find out more information about light codes and all the ways to work with me, see the link in the show notes or visit amybelair.com. Thank you so much for being here with me on this episode. I appreciate you more than my words could ever say. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, and share, and I will catch you on the next episode.